you hear me? Okay. So, until we wait, so just a presentation about me. This will be a presentation about the paper I used for my thesis for my bachelor degree in archaeology. So it will be a research I did about the kind of usage we have for historical games as a tool to raise interest in archaeology and history themes, so that we can use this game on this purpose. So, well, I don't see it coming up, so I'm just talking then, just hoping it will come in some way. So, this research I did was focusing on two ways. The first one I did was using a survey on the Italian community, because that was the region I was focusing on, to have a much more restricted area where I could use my tools on researching and having responses for this kind of studies. Sorry. So the first one was a research using a survey. Then, with my results from the survey, I concluded on some research using Google Trends. That, if anyone knows here, is a tool from Google who shows all the researches with their research tool done from 2004 until now, and search all the keywords. Okay, so I see it's coming up. So yeah. I'm Giacomo Garbo. I don't think I really say that in the first place, so sorry about that. So this is the title of my thesis I did, and also of the paper. So as I said, it's a research focusing on Italy, using the two types of analysis, using Google Forms for the surveys and Google Trends for the graphics analysis that I was talking about just a few seconds ago. So we have the survey. That was the first one I did because it served me to gather all the information to do the next one, research by the graphics. The objectives were three in the first place. There was the first one, that was how can video games used as an interesting tool for making people interested in historical themes. So there was the three sub-objectives. That was asking directly, using the survey, to the people how they were interested in video games. And the other objective was what genres of video games does the Italian community find more suitable for historical video game? And the last one, creating a list of video games that would actually make the player interested in the historical themes they treated. And this one was the last list of video games that was used then for the research doing next of this one. So the result was pretty assuring, because like the 91% of the answer to the survey were the people that actually bought a game just because there was an historical setting they were interested about. And another 43% were the people that have been so passionate about a historical theme inside a video game that they actually looked for outside the video game, searching in history books or even on the internet. So it's not really a wide percentage, but it's actually more than expected from this kind of research. So We also have some questions regarding what type of genres we can use for historical video games. And seems like the Italian community has kind of are focusing for this kind of answer that finds these genres you can see here. That's actually the numbers represents the answer we had during the survey, and that we can see that there is a straight connection between the well, the connection is not shown here, but every genre we can see has a strictly connection with some kind of settings that I'm going to tell you about later on. So the other results were about video games list that the answer from the survey came from players that told us that was some games that made them interested in the historical themes. So you see, Skyrim is not really some historical game, as we can see, but it was really named many times in the survey. So something that came up is that there's not the need to be an historical game to raise history about some historical settings, because Skyrim is obviously not setting in an historical period, but resembles sometime, in some ways, medieval times in Europe, and also some Viking-like settings and cities in some way. So this can make people interested in that kind of period of time, even though the game doesn't have this kind of purpose. So it's interested also that to know that there is a way to raise historical interest in some kind of historical period through a game that is not focused on that purpose. So now talking about the graphical analysis using Google Trends. This is done by using the list of video games I just talked about. So if you don't know about how does Google Trends works, he shows a graphic we can see here that shows from 2004 until now, but you can choose a limited period of time if you need to do some specific research on some other restricted period. And it shows you a percentage from 0% to 100% related to the period of time in which the research was at its maximum, and then, of course, at 100%, and at 0% the time where none research on that period was done. So what I did was taking the list of games, like we have here an example of God of War, taking the settings of that game, that is ancient Greece, even if it is not really accurate, as we can all know from who have played the game. Then taking about historical keywords related to that game and that historical settings, so mythology, Greek mythology, Titans, and so on. And looking in Google Trends how these keywords were searched with Google during this period of time. We can see also matching here on the period of time on where God of War 2 was released and God of War 3 was released. And here, this is the search for the word Titans. As we can see, on March 2007, that when God of War 2 was released, there's a brief enhancement of the research for the word Titans in the few months coming next to the release of the game. The same things happen when God of War 3 is released. As we can see, there's a spike just on the months after the release of the game. Of course, Google Trends is not something focused on video games related research. There can be influence on these graphics. As we can see, as you can imagine, this research are not only influenced by video games, but are influenced by manufacturers. So, as we can see in these graphics, this is the graphics related to the research of the word Medici. That is a famous family from the Italian culture in Florence. But we could tell that in October 2016, that was a great success for the game that came out, talking about Florence and the Renaissance and everything about medicine. But we have to take in consideration also other factors. And in that period of time, in October 2016, this happened all together. So this one was a production and was the prima assoluta, that's first shown in the whole world only in Italy and then in the rest of the world. So it was something that in Italy had a great audience and outclassed all the other TV shows in that period of time. So that is something that is not working well with our research. So sometimes I just have to give up on knowing if that there was an actual raising of historical history because of that video game, because there was other things happening in that period of time. But there are also some other kind of graphics that shows something that can help us. Here you see that there is a like a periodical cadence of the research. I correlated that with the school period, because for the word Florence, the research rises with the start of the school period and drastically drops down with the end of the school period in Italy. But we can see that these are the release dates of 3 of the Assassin's Creed games that were settled in Florence in November 2009, November 2010, and November 2011. But we can see that in the 2 years before and 2 years after, there's a part of the graphic that drops down after the first months of autumn. But then, in 2009, 2010, and 2011, in that period of time of November, that the research raises just a little bit, but it makes a difference from the years before and the years after. So, of course, we cannot say that this is certainly because of the video games, but it's something that it makes probably caused by video games. So we can say that this is some kind of clue that we can use to understand how video games influence the historical interest. What conclusion can we come up with all the research I did? Are there the best genres and setting to raise historical themes in Italian video games? Here I listed some themes and genres I came up with the results. But of course, the main answer is depends, because something also has to do with the purposes of a game, why it's made, what target it has, what is the purpose of making a game. Does it have to be historically accurate because you want to do so, or does it just have to be fun, to be enjoyable, and just have an historical setting? These are all answers you have to try to find while you develop a game, of course. But this kind of research actually finds some clues on what you could focus on if you're doing a certain kind of video game. Something I would like to say is that if are you trying to make, for example, a game setting in medieval Europe, most of the Italian video gamers would like to have a game that is an RPG, because that is what they find more suitable for that kind of historical period. And if you're doing of course, a video game about the First World War, the Second World War, or something, of course, related to modern war, most of them find it more suitable to do an FPS video game. This is we could say, obvious things, but this is actually what came out by an actual survey and actual research with this kind of graphic as data. So it is a start. It's not something that can actually be, we can be actually be sure about, but it actually came out as some kind of solution as a start for this kind of research. So thank you. If you want, for looking to the research I did, it's uploaded on WordPress. You can find it here. Unfortunately, it's only in Italian, but if you would like to look at the graphics and all the tabs, it's all there uploaded, so you can look at them if you want. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Giacomo. Very interesting presentation. Are there any questions specifically to Giacomo? I have a question myself. So you said you did a small survey to correlate with the data to find the games, right?
Yes, I did the survey on the first purpose. Yeah.
Did you also think of looking up also games that were not mentioned in the survey, just to see if games that are not so popular have similar impact, or?
Yes, on the actual research after the survey, I looked about video games. The one that was mentioned in the presentation are not the only one, of course, I saw. And there were actually more games that were also not really famous, like I said, Assassin's Creed or God of War. There are actually also some kind of Italian video games about history that were not so popular in worldwide world, but some kind of Italian indie company about the historical video games. So it was I tried to do a kind of wide research about these video games.